Funding for this edition of Think Tank with Steve Adubato has been provided by the New Jersey Education Association, Wells Fargo, RWJ Barnabas Health, the Russell Berry Foundation, making a difference. Keystone Mountain Lakes Regional Council of Carpenters, your future is in our building. New Jersey Resources, Fedway Associates, ADP, a comprehensive provider of human resources technology and services. And by Berkeley College. Education prepares us to reach our dreams. Be inspired. Promotional support provided by NJ.com. Small news, big news, true Jersey. And by Insider NJ.
I'm Steve Adubato. We're here in Atlantic City at the NJEA Convention. 166 years they've been at it. And what's interesting about this convention is that there are educators, educational administrators, others. There are folks who have come here, also from outside of New Jersey, to deliver powerful messages. And the gentleman you're about to see on camera is just such a person. He is Dr. Cornel West. It says here, professor, philosopher, author, activist. He is so much more. 20 books later. Nationally, internationally known. You honor us, Dr. West, by joining us.
Brother, I'm the one who's blessed to be here with you, and I want to salute you for being such a force for good.
It's very kind of you.
Put a smile on your father and your mama's face, though, brother.
Thank you.
You're doing wonderful, wonderful work, though, man.
In fact, let me ask you this. Let's get right into this. One of the things that's always struck me about you is the way you talk about race and race relations in this country. A is important, B makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable important sometimes?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, education is all about making sure that we are unsettled and unnerved enough to critically examine ourselves, to scrutinize ourselves, interrogate ourselves. We can't grow without that kind of criticism. And that's a certain kind of learning how to die. You know, when you give up a certain assumption or a prejudice is a form of death, from that comes rebirth, from that comes maturity, from that comes growth. But you don't want to unsettle people in such a way that you shut them down. You're trying to make contact with our common humanity.
How do we know where? Okay, let me play devil's advocate if I could.
Yes.
So, and by the way, Dr. West gave a very powerful keynote address. It was hard to even get him over here because everybody wanted to be close to him, shake his hand, hug him, take a picture with him, because you made a difference here. Why does a convention like this, focusing, you have educators and others in the education world from all over the state, but focusing on social justice is a big theme here. What in your mind, what does that have to do with education of our children?
Well, at the very center of it, you know, the greatest American philosopher was named John Dewey. Wrote a book called Democracy and Education in 1916. He said, you can't have a democracy, you can't sustain a democracy without there being a civic education in which people are Socratic. They're willing to examine themselves. And justice simply is accountability. Is what my dear brother Jeff Stout, just retired from Princeton, calls answerability.
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 Let me operationalize that, if I could ask you.
So we have to have dialogue. Dialogue is at the center of democracy. When you and I are having dialogue, you keep me accountable, I try to keep you accountable. We got smiles on our faces. We know we can learn and listen from one another.
We can disagree, but do it.
Absolutely.
Do it how?
Well, one, we ought to disagree because we often disagree with ourselves.
Whoa, wait a minute.
We've got a lot of tensions inside of us. We're struggling all the time with what our views are about
If we're thinking.
Well, and even when we're honest about it, let me just say when we're honest about it, because most people think.
As opposed to I'm so sure about what I think, and nothing or nobody is gonna get me off that.
That's right. There's nobody I know who believes that every exact opinion they have is one of certainty. There's got to be some probability that leaves open uncertainty. And the same is true when it comes to issues of life, of religion, of politics, of sports, of music. All these opinions are opinions that are predicated in part on being accountable to others. Why do you think John Coltrane is better than Sonny Stitt?
Than Bird.
a bird. And he said, well, they're not. They're too good to compare each other.
Right.
Oh, what's Sarah Vaughan? Let's go New Jersey. Let's go Newark.
Let's go Newark. I'll give you another one.
Yes.
Woody Shaw.
Oh.
See, you didn't see that coming.
Oh, I didn't.
Because that's Newark.
Woody.
I was born and raised in Newark.
Woody's a giant.
It was Sarah Vaughan. By the way, NJPAC, Sarah Vaughan Way, if you check it out where it is.
That's
But
right.
Woody Shaw, the great jazz.
Philip Roth, another
the
genius
great.
coming out of Newark.
That's right.
But all of these, people debate about these things. It's politics, it can be music. And once you have dialogue, this is why Socrates is so very important, right? Because once you have dialogue, you got to make that human connection. I mean, the difference is that, Socrates never sheds a tear, Jesus weeps. You see?
I hear you.
Isaiah weeps, Muhammad weeps. So that weeping, the tears make a difference. You can't just have the dialogue. You got to have compassion. You got to have what I call a love. You got to have a certain kind of empathy.
So speaking of empathy, speaking of questioning oneself, and speaking of those who are on the national and, dare I say, international scene, where, by the way, if you're listening on the audio side, we're listening to and paying attention to Dr. Cornel West, who doesn't really need an introduction. Let me ask you this. The President of the United States, our President, Donald Trump, rarely seems to question himself. He seems very assured of his views. Does that make him, quote unquote, a strong leader?
No, not at all.
What does it make?
That the benchmark of spiritual and moral maturity, humility and tenacity at the same time. That's Abe Lincoln at his best. That's Martin King at his best. That's Fannie Lou Hamer at his best, you see. Probably your father, I didn't know him. But humility and tenacity.
Why both?
At the same time.
Why do you need both?
Because humility, you recognize you could be wrong. But tenacity, you got to have courage to take a stand. Because we're not talking about relativism, we're not talking about a nihilism, a skepticism. You have to be willing to take a stand and pay a cost. But you've got to have the humility. I could be wrong.
Does a president lack humility?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Brother Trump is the exemplification of immaturity, lack of humility. And he's got too much gangster in him. And by gangster, what I mean is thinking you got to dominate all the time. You got to be center stage all the time. You got to manipulate. You got to engage in conquest all the time. So it's not a name calling, because I've got gangster in me. I've got to struggle with it all the time. And so in that sense, I know what gangster is. And when I see it, both I feel pity, but the fact that he's president would meaning that he is dividing, polarizing. He's so tied to big money and big military, creating all kind of repercussions around the world. It's a sad thing that such a grand democratic project can produce such. I would say it's not even mediocrity, because that's a compliment.
And I've also the quote is interesting. We're going to be sitting down with Governor Christie Whitman, former governor of New Jersey, who recently. She had a tweet up that compared the president to Hitler and then took it down quickly. Dr. West, you have said about the president that Donald Trump is, at this moment, becoming the American version of Hitler and Mussolini. My family is from Italy. I know a little bit about Mussolini.
Oh, absolutely.
We have created a fascist Frankenstein. You didn't take it. Do you take any of that?
No, I don't take it back. But the stress is on the American version of.
Go ahead.
Benito Mussolini was distinctly Italian at a particular moment, 1910s, 1920s. Hitler distinctively German, with all of the vicious anti-Jewish hatred that goes all the way back to Martin Luther. American version means individualistic, narcissistic, innocent, always claiming to be innocent.
Victim?
Victim, and especially the innocent. You see, America is a very unique democratic experiment. We've got some magnificent human beings, magnificent features that go into our energy, possibility, vitality, but this claim of innocence, perceived innocence, never taking responsibility for our actions, our words. That's why our U.S. Constitution has no reference to the institution of slavery in it.
Because we don't even acknowledge that.
You're in denial. You're in denial. You don't acknowledge it's there. 22% of your inhabitants of the 13 colonies are not just enslaved, their labor is producing the wealth for your democracy.
What does it say about us that we don't acknowledge it?
It just means we don't want to grow up. We don't want to grow up. We think we got this Peter Pan mentality. We're forever young. We're obsessed with newness and novelty. We're obsessed with youth. But the distinctive side of maturity, which is vulnerability, humility, you've got to grow up. You can't just grow rich, you can't just grow powerful. You got to grow up. And grow up means taking in your own faults. And again, when I say American, I'm not talking about everybody.
Right.
Lincoln did it, you see. Mario Rukeyser did it. Vito Marcantonio did it in New York.
Google Vito Marcantonio,
He's a giant.
reformer in New York
He's a giant.
City.
He's one of the great giants. He
Absolutely.
was a lawyer for W.B. Du Bois.
That's right.
Du Bois was the greatest public intellectual in the history of the country.
Influenced you?
Oh, my God,
Your reading
yes.
of Du Bois influenced you significantly?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Langston Hughes?
Langston, too. Stephen Sondheim.
Stevens?
He's not in denial. Act 2 of Into the Woods. Reality hits. Happy Thereafter, Act 1. Act 2, Cinderella meets the prince and discovers he has no there there. You remember that wonderful line? He says, wishes come true, but not free.
I got to ask you something. You're fascinated with literature, your fascination with reading, your ability to quote these extraordinary, important works of art.
Yeah.
How young were you when you knew you were fascinated by reading and everything reading would bring to your life?
As long as I can remember.
Grew up where?
You know, I grew up in Sacramento, California, chocolate side of Sacramento, California. I'm West Coast to the core, but I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Moved out?
Moved out when I was 4 years old. Yeah.
Voracious reader?
Oh, yeah. But love to read. Joy. Great joy. Beyond pleasure.
Joy.
We're talking about joy, enduring things. The joy of reading, the joy of learning.
While you're talking about joy, Dr. West, I'm going to bring you back to something. We were talking about Donald Trump. I need to do this.
Sure.
Do you believe that a significant number of those who support President Trump, who not only support him and voted for him, and a lot of you watching are longtime friends in public broadcasting, my personal friends, who voted for President Trump, but will refuse to even be critical of him about anything, right? Devoted to President Trump. Do you see them, because of Trump's policies and his rhetoric and his behavior, do you think it's inherently racist on some level?
Well, that's a good question, though. It's a good question. I mean, one...
For those who are white.
For those, yeah. But let's just first deal with Trump himself. I mean, Trump is... I'm a Christian, and he's my brother. And my brother can be my foe and my enemy politically. But he's made in the image of the same God that I'm made in the image of, which means he has the capacity to change and be transformed.
Do you think he sees you that way?
I don't know. You know, I never really talked to him and so forth. But my thing is not quid pro quo. You know, I don't have to love him for him to love me back.
You don't care what he thinks of you?
I don't really care,
Go
because this is my own sense of integrity. So my brother is just a human connection. So he's not a demon. He's not a devil. He's a human being who chooses to be a gangster. You see, so that's a different kind of connection. So then the people who are attracted to Trump, they got so many different kind of people attracted to Trump.
All different
it's
kind of people.
all the variety, economic reasons. Some of them looked at Hillary and said, I can't stand Hillary, so I got to go with the other person, but I can't stand that person too. Others were looking at him and said, well, thank God we pushed Obama back because we look like these black people were taking over. So it goes hand in hand. But there's a significant number of people who supported Trump who are not doing it for racist reasons. And this is very important. We see this about my dear brother Bernie Sanders, you know.
Yes.
That when Bernie and I go
Bernie
out together, oh yeah, we've traveled, we've done, you know, over 75 events together so far. When we go way out in the boonies, we got people who are fired up, who voted for Trump, upset, and now supporting Bernie.
We are in Atlantic City, the New Jersey Education Association. We're having the honor to sit down and speak with the Dr. Cornel West. He's agreed to sit with us for a little bit longer. I promise you, more important conversation to come. We'll be right back.
To watch more Think Tank with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
Steve Adubato at the NJEA Convention. We are speaking to Dr. Cornel West. Doctor, in our last conversation, you were talking about Bernie Sanders, and we're gonna date ourselves because this interview will air after. We don't know what's going to happen. There's an impeachment inquiry going on. There'll be a vote, and it seems to me. We'll date ourselves. But let me ask you this: what does in fact draw you? And we don't know where Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or anyone else is going to be. What draws you to, dare I say, a Bernie Sanders?
Oh, I mean, the thing about Brother Bernie is that he has a longevity of integrity. that he's a thermostat, he's not a thermometer. You know, most politicians are thermometers. They want to check and see what the polls are before they really utter their convictions. Whereas a thermostat shapes the climate of opinion, it doesn't just reflect it. He's been a thermostat for 40 years. So that he says what he means what he says. Most politicians don't do that.
Is he let me ask you this, is he, quote, too far left to be elected President of the United States, in your view?
I think that if we follow the polls and see what people are actually yearning for, which is security from domination, a wonderful phrase by Brother Jeff Stout again, security from domination, which is not just a matter of policy. They want to live a life of decency and dignity, and they want to get some distance from the insecurity, economic, political, and so forth. Now, I've got disagreements with Brother Bernie. I mean, you know, we debate all the time.
Reasonable people disagree.
Absolutely. See, I'm a jazz man. Jazz man, I don't want unanimity, you know.
That bores you.
Yeah, and, you know, I come from a black people. Our anthem is lift every voice. It's not lift every echo. I don't want people just part of an echo
Different
chamber.
voices.
You got your voice. Your voice is like your fingerprint. My voice like my fingerprint.
Unique.
We unique, singular. We raising, we bouncing off against one another. But for Bernie, it's a question of integrity. It's hard to find politicians these days.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up another
genuine
name.
integrity.
I'm sorry for interrupting. We're
Yes,
listening
no,
to Dr. Cornel West. I'm going to ask you this because you have, along with some others, but you've been a leader, not just in the African-American community, but in this country, talking about President Obama.
Absolutely.
His tenure and his legacy.
Absolutely.
Which, in your case, talking about him, has not always been pleasant and positive.
That's right.
What is the problem, in your view, with the Obama presidency, and what are the ramifications of it? Loaded question. And what the heck does it have anything to do with Donald Trump being president now? I know I just asked. I broke the rule. I asked 3 questions at once, but go ahead.
But that third question about the backlash, there is an element of real backlash.
That?
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about that. We're talking about a slice of our fellow citizens, not vast majority, but a slice of our fellow citizens. Enough to make a difference.
That's right.
Absolutely.
In key states, but go ahead.
In key states, too. But no, you see, my dear brother Barack Obama, he and I started very closely together. I supported him in 2008, supported him in 2012, actually.
In Chicago.
The 65 events in 2008, no, all around the country. We started in Iowa and ended up in Ohio the night before. Well, what happened was I told him from the very beginning I was going to be a critical supporter. You see, because, you see, my calling in my lane is to try to tell the truth and be free. A politician's lane is not to tell the truth and be free, it's to get elected. So when we first met, I told him, I said, what is your relation to the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and Ella Baker, right? That has to do with poverty. It has to do with mass incarceration. It has to do with foreign policy and not dropping bombs on innocent people and so forth. So when he brought in the Wall Street folk and bailed out Wall Street rather than homeowners.
2008?
2008.
8 and 9?
When he had the meeting in March of 2009 with the CEOs from Wall Street and said, I stand between you and the pitchforks, but I support you, I will protect you, and not one Wall Street criminal went to jail, and yet mass incarceration is still expanding on the ground with poor and working people of all colors, disproportionately chocolate, and when they continued to drop those drones in Afghanistan and Pakistan and Libya and Somalia, and they knew they were also killing innocent people. You see, just as a Christian and as a person, I had to go at him and say, look, that is wrong,
told him, sorry for
brother.
interrupting, Dr. West, you told him directly what you thought.
Yes, I did.
You said before listening is important. Being open to other points of view, that's important, particularly for a leader. As a student of leadership, I'm fascinated by the role of listening to others.
Yes.
Was President Obama listening to you?
I think initially he was, but he got disproportionately influenced by the Wall Street people, the Tim Geithners and Larry Summers, who were so tied to Wall Street at that time, and Brenner, who was tied to the counterterrorist policies of drones and what have you, and trashing the whistleblowers when it came to surveillance, Manning, Snowden, and so forth. So I had to be true to my own calling, which is to tell the truth, no matter what color the president is.
And him being black, you don't even sit there and go, at no point do you say, you know what, our first African-American president, incredible historical significance, let me back off a little bit. You don't think to yourself, a second?
Well, no, what I did was I always salute his unprecedented symbolic significance as the first black president, that's an indictment of white supremacist ideology and practice. I always give him credit. I love his brilliance. I love his poise. We miss that now with Trump, no doubt about that. But when it comes to Wall Street, allowing the unaccountability, back to our issue again, when it comes to drones, when it comes to surveillance, and it took him too long for me to talk about the new Jim Crow. It took him 7 years before he had any moves against the mass incarceration system. Whereas when it comes to our poor and working people, you got to hit that head on, just like you got to hit the schools.
Do you think he ducked it? Let me ask you this. And
he ducked it for political reasons.
Do you think, okay, let me.
Strategy.
So you think if he did that too early on, you think he thought, listen, we're doing a lot of, trying to figure out what's up, that if he had done that, that there were too many white Americans who just said, wait a minute, hold on. Is that right?
I think so. I think it's not just him, but that's how politicians think. They've got to be very calculating in terms of what they do and what they say.
That?
I can respect that within the context if, in fact, it's still moving in the right direction. But my calling is not to be strategic. We're in different lanes. You see, we got different lanes. My calling is to try to be a truth teller and a witness bearer and pursue truth given my own failures and falsehoods.
Not to win.
It's not, well, I want to win in terms of making sure the issues are visible and the people's humanity are accessed.
That's winning.
That's a certain kind of winning.
We'll go back, because the last part of the question I asked is, what do you think President Obama's presidency, Barack Obama's presidency, had anything to do, if at all, Dr. West, with Donald Trump being elected president?
No, I think that there was a slice of our fellow citizens who got the impression that black people were running things and they didn't want to be in a situation where black leadership was dictating their destiny. Now, the irony was Obama's leadership was tied to Wall Street, tied to military-industrial complex.
Pretty white.
He didn't say too much about race. Remember, he wouldn't say too much about race. And I would say over and over again, I'm not talking about race just in terms of skin pigmentation. Race is about integrity, honesty, decency, generosity, and the humanity of people who have been hated and dominated. I would say exactly the same thing if we had a black supremacist civilization and white brothers and sisters have been enslaved for 400 years, enslaved for 244 years, Jim Crow for 100 years, and you got white bodies hanging from trees where you had black fight, then you got to be in solidarity with the white brothers, because it's a moral and spiritual issue.
By the way, as Dr. West talks about this, do yourself a favor, go on our PBS website, Dr. Gates. It's some very important work. Henry Louis Gates, that's really important work talking about the lynchings that went on in our country after the Civil War, and the museum that is dedicated to telling that part of the story.
That's Brian Stevenson.
That's tremendous.
Yeah, that's brother Brian down in Montgomery.
I saw that interview. Let me ask you this in a couple minutes we have. When it comes to race and our ability to talk to each other,
yes,
openly, honestly, with respect, as opposed to who are you with, Trump or not?
Right.
Are you here or are you here?
Right.
But I'm not saying Trump is all about race. What I'm asking is, how hopeful are you, Dr. West, that we moving forward can have meaningful, respectful dialogue without all the vitriol and hate? Loaded question, I know, as we finish up.
No, the thing is, we've got to first begin with ourselves. Are we willing to make sure we revel in the humanity of other people even when we disagree with them? To give them the benefit of being right or wrong, recognizing we can be right or wrong, and then pursue the dialogue together.
As opposed to demonizing them, they must be bad people if they don't agree with me.
That's right. No, that's not, and that's just not true, because all of us have various kind of blindnesses. All of us have various kind of shortcomings and myopia. And to the degree to which we think we're pure is the degree to which we're just reproducing the myth of America ourselves. We're so innocent. So you got a lot of liberal self-righteousness out there.
Liberal self-righteousness.
Oh, yeah, they look down on the working people, look down on conservative people, think that somehow they've got access to a truth, and these folk are just ignorant. That's innocence, too. We were criticizing the innocence at the beginning. All of us have failures. Try again, fail better. That's Samuel Beckett. Try again, fail better. All of us have certain elements of failure built inside of who we are. The question is, can we accent the best of who we are? Because all of us have some real potential.
But I tell you what, You still sound optimistic to me.
Well, I'm full of hope, not optimism. I'm a prisoner of
What's
hope,
the
but not
difference? Real
optimism.
quick, what's the difference?
Hope means you're going to keep moving regardless of what the circumstances are. No matter what the evidence is, you keep loving, you keep fighting for justice. Optimism means, what does the evidence look like? Does it look like it
You're not even looking for evidence. You're just hopeful.
looking for evidence. That's exactly right.
Well, let me say this. I am hopeful, and I'm also optimistic and confident that folks who took the time to watch and listen to Dr. Cornel West for this very in-depth interview here in Atlantic City at the New Jersey Education Association will be better for it because they'll be questioning themselves. And I cannot thank you enough. You honor us.
As long as your show is on, that's a sign of hope right there.
I'm using that endorsement, Dr. West.
Oh, please. And I say yes.
Thank you.
I'm in your corner, brother.
Appreciate it. We are in yours.
No,
I'm Steve Adubato. That, way more importantly, is Dr. Cornel West. And we thank you for staying with us. Catch you next time.
Think Tank with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by the New Jersey Education Association, Wells Fargo, RWJ Barnabas Health, the Russell Berry Foundation, Keystone Mountain Lakes Regional Council of Carpenters, New Jersey Resources, Fedway Associates, ADP, and by Berkeley College. Promotional support provided by NJ.com and by Insider NJ. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.
You may not have heard of TAVR. Raj and Sandhya have. It's the minimally invasive alternative to open heart valve replacement. RWJ Barnabas Health is New Jersey's leading TAVR provider, and we continue to perfect it. Patients are often back to their lives in just a few days. Innovative valve replacement surgery. Because you can't be replaced. RWJ Barnabas Health. Let's be healthy together.